Okay, this is a video on my shortwave radio, ham radio timeline of what ham radio or what shortwave radio equipment I've had over the years. And let me start this. Okay, this is the first thing I ever had, and this is the RadioShack Shortwave Radio Kit. And they sold these at the RadioShack store. I do remember these red cases, and basically the parts would stick at the bottom, and you just solder the leads of the wires together. And what I remember is, like, I remember when I bought this, I got it working to the point where I was able to see WWV at least, which I thought was like, ooh, it's actually working. So I did actually get it working, but I did smoke it out and somehow by accident. I'm not sure what I did, but somehow I broke it, pretty soon after getting it working. But it did at least work for a bit, so it did actually function. Maybe I smoked the transistors or something. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I had no test equipment or anything, so I was just building it. But this is the first thing. I remember I would, I would bike over to the RadioShack store in Glendale here, and they had a collection of these things. I built some of these others of these kits with this red case like this. I don't remember what other ones. Maybe if I think about it, I'll remember what other ones I had. But actually, they're sort of. I don't even know if there's maybe there's something similar to this now. But those days, like, they had them in like a little rack, and you would just buy them. And like I did this with basically like saved up my quarters and lunch money and bought it that way. So very young. I have no idea how old I was when I bought this, but I did have it. And I go to the next one. The next one is this thing. This is the Heath Kit. SW7W7, I believe is what it is. I didn't even remember the name. I had to look the name up. But I remember that look. I remember how this, I remember the appearance of this radio. And this was a Heath Kit. And I think I got it, I don't know, I got it as a Christmas present or something. And my father assembled it. My father, followed the Heath Kit. And he didn't trust me because I would have destroyed it probably. But he carefully put it together, and it did work. It did work. And this radio is like, I don't know, it's kind of, it does it's fine for shortwave. I do remember hearing Radio Moscow and also like BBC and those kind of stations, Voice of America on shortwave radio in the old days. I heard some ham radio in the old days, but it was like, I don't think my antenna was so great when I was using this, so I would hear maybe one person talking on ham radio basically. So it was like I would tune around, and maybe I didn't know when to listen exactly. I do remember old days. This was the 70s, so CB radio was crazy, and I remember I would tune by the CB radio band and hear all kinds of stuff. And I don't remember what I would hear, but I don't even know I was listening for content. I was just looking for stuff, just sort of scanning bands and listening for things. I think also shortwave was there was no internet. There was you had the library, you had television, and you had radio. That was you had books or magazines or radio, or TV. That was your only way of getting information. And I do remember listening to the the Voice? I saw Radio Moscow. I remember the programming as being very boring and very quirky, and they would talk about. I just remember them sort of droning on in a very peculiar, echoey voice. I don't know if there's any recordings left of what those stations sound like. But in the old days, in the 70s, it was sort of more. It felt more mysterious because it's kind of receiving, radio signals from countries that were pretty opaque. You couldn't. People did not go. People did not go to Russia those days. It was pretty mysterious what was happening in the Soviet Union. So this was mostly shortwave. This radio does cover a single sideband, but it's quirky, and it doesn't cover it like a normal it has this BFO knob which you kind of tune. Like most shortwave radios, you have an upper sideband or lower sideband knob, but this one has this BFO knob which you kind of twiddle and sort of tunes in the station that way. And I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it worked well enough to work, but it was fussy, and it was definitely required twiddling, I would say. I do think does have that incandescent. This is a good picture of one. This is one I found on the internet, but it has this one. It has like this. This is what it looked like. It had these nice incandescent bulbs in it. You know, there's something cool about old radios and their incandescent bulbs. Okay, go on the next one here. And this is the first real ham radio I purchased. And how did I get this? I bought this mail order. I think I bought it mail order used over I literally mailed a check to some company, and they mailed these radios, these boxes to me. This thing's pretty quirky. It has it was a super old, I remember HeathKit sold these things in the 70s, but even by the 70s they're kind of relics of the 60s almost. They had no single sideband. They only had AM. I'm sure people are still using them, but I never it had a AM mode which I never used ever. It was a funky radio too, because it's a matched set of transmitter and receiver, but you were kind of up to your own devices about how to switch your antenna between transmit and receive. That there was I don't remember how it worked, but there was basically you'd have to just literally buy a relay, I think it was the same company. I think these Dow key relays, which are still sold, to switch your antenna between transmit and receive, which did not come with a radio. So it didn't just happen. It required effort. I think HeathKit made another model that was only CW that was actually kind of less fussed to get working, basically. But this was like a tube radio. I do remember going through the whole thing of you had to tune it. You had to tune like a tube radio. I remember it came with there was an option for a crystal calibrator. That was old days. You would get this device that would tune in, that would put off harmonics at 100 kilohertz, and you would adjust your frequency that way, because it was pretty unstable. It was it was truly a creature of the old days. The top box is the VFO. So the bottom transceiver, the DX60 is only made. It only had it was made for crystals. I never used crystals. I think original novice license, way old days, you could only use crystal control transceivers, crystal control transmitters. And so this one had the but that was the 60s, and but I had it in the 70s. So by the 70s, everyone could have a VFO. So that's why the VFO was an extra option that you had to buy separately. It wasn't super clear to me at the time what was required, but I sort of figured it out, and I had all the pieces. Basically what I had looked pretty much like this here. I do remember, this is kind of an odd story. But I remember my parents, it's you have radios, there's this thing in people's radio, expensive ham radio equipment. It's also expensive, And I remember one time we got robbed. Somebody broke into our house and they stole a bunch of stuff, but they completely ignored all the ham radio equipment. Not one piece of ham radio stuff was touched at all. So it's my parents were always talking about expensive ham radio equipment, but no, the actual guy who robbed our house didn't care about ham radio equipment. He completely ignored it. So when we were robbed, I lost nothing myself. I don't know if there was resentment from that, or not from my parents, but that's what happened. And then I got this thing here. This is the I don't remember if it was the Galaxy 5. I think there were other Galaxies. This is the one I found pictures of, though. The picture rings true to what I remember owning. This is another what they call boat anchor transceivers. This one could do single sideband. It was what can I say? It was heavy. It's hard to see how heavy it is. There's like another box too with this. Like there's a second box that's the power supply and speaker that literally is like, it's like a giant brick of metal essentially. It worked. It had pretty good power too, actually. I was sort of distracted by other things. I did more listening with this, to be honest, than anything else. One of the problems I had was that I had TV interference problems in the 60s and 70s. Like, analog TV was just hard to keep ham radio out of analog TV. And my father was not appreciating it, like me screwing up his television programming watching. So that cut back my transmitting hours a bit. I never talked much. See, what did I have? I think I had a general license. I had the general license actually in the 70s, but I didn't actually transmit single sideband, I was mostly listening. I did some CW. I did more listening than anything else, to be honest. That was really more my thing. But I did do some actual ham radio. I had like, I remember my yard, I had like, I set up, dipoles. I had dipole antennas, and I had like a 40-meter dipole antenna, and so it was kind of low, but it was enough to actually hear stuff and to actually transmit. So I had things. It was basically set up exactly where I'm sitting right now, actually. So I'm sort of sitting where that radio was sitting right now. I did like this to college with me. I'm not even sure why I took it to college, but I had it, and I put like an antenna on my dorm room, and I did some fussing with it. But I was super busy in college. I had zero free time in college for anything. There's let alone ham radio in college. You see, Berkeley back in those days, they had a station. I remember they had I think they tore out when they rebuilt Corey Hall, and they basically destroyed the ham radio station at the engineering department. And later, but when I was there, they had this pretty old Drake gear, and they had a tower over the station. I remember going by there and kind of hanging out a little bit, but I didn't operate that much. I didn't like. But I remember it's interesting. They had radio teletype, and they had this they had those like old vintage radio teletype machine that was like pretty impressive. But anyway, I had this one for a while. I had it mostly in a period when I wasn't really playing with radios that much, but I was kind of, actually my thing is almost actually kind of more the gear than more the actually using the ham radio, to be honest. It's like I'm not like, I haven't really been much for really DXing or doing that stuff, but I'm sort of like the gear accumulation. Though I got rid of these radios at some point just because like I just avoid room. I mean, I don't want to be like piled in old ham radio stuff, but I still like to have like current gear, Oh yeah, let me go one more thing with this one. This one I bought at Henry Radio in Anaheim. That's what I remember. It was like it was a pretty long drive from here in Glendale down to Henry Radio. But I do remember going down to that store, and I just remember like looking at stuff and maybe this was okay, whatever, and then just buying it. They had the store, the old Henry Radio store was over 50%. The old one, the Anaheim store was over 50% like used gear, and they had like tons of like old Heath Kit stuff, which someone had warned me away from used Heath Kit. Like after, like I think maybe like the kit building skills are not always predictable. So I'm not sure. Maybe people still are keeping those running. I think they're easy to fix because they're so simple. I do remember this thing had arcing problems, so it was like there was some kind of problem with it when the power was higher. So I could only really transmit lower power with it. This is the next one. I bought this. This is the first like Japanese radio I bought. I bought this out of college, and I was working, and I was. God, where was I out of college? I don't remember if I was I think I was out of college. I bought this from the ham radio outlet. The Oakland store was on Telegraph, which is closer to me now than the current store, which is down by the freeway. But actually, it's nice having a ham radio store nearby, actually, because you can actually go there and buy things. which is nice. I gave this radio to my brother. So my brother had a license too, and I gave it to him. So I think he still has it actually. And this radio is pretty good. This one has the work bands. This first radio that had 30 meters and 12 meters in these other bands. I had I remember it has a funkiness. It had some funkiness with the preamp. Like the preamp would like drop out and you kind of twiddle it and then the relay would start working. And it's a little tweaky, but it worked pretty good. It has that like, it's precious in that way that Japanese gear is. It has that Japanese radio preciousness. It's quite, it's quite delicate. And you open it up and it's, it's obviously, it's really super clean inside, and it's pretty nice. I was living in the duplex at my house in Berkeley, and I had a Hustler. I had a Hustler vertical on the ground. I never had very good luck with that Hustler. Like the Hustler was on the ground, and I don't know. I didn't put that much time into it. And I would like try to transmit, and I never really talked that much. I was doing other issues, but like I never really was super successful with that Hustler. What is one of these trap dipoles that had? I think they still sell that antenna too. And maybe it's too low, or maybe it's some problem somewhere else. Though it did tune up okay. And then I later switched to a butternut vertical on the roof, which actually worked okay. The butternut vertical was the first time I was really like kind of functional in ham radio. Really. I do remember. I remember the butternut function. It was just I had radials on the air, so it was a lot of wires. It was just a giant mess of wires coming out in all directions. But yeah, I was sort of like occasionally playing with the Morse code, and and I had a modulator for radio teletype, but I don't know if I ever used it or not. But I was sort of hooked up, and I was kind of playing around with it. I was kind of more setting it up and using it. So I did make some QSOs. I didn't really use it a lot, but I did have it, and I always had one in the house. And this when I started to get a little bit more serious about ham radio a little later. I bought this probably around, I don't even know what year. Maybe like the 90s, I think. Late 90s. This is a Kenwood TS870. And I was sort of like, I've been kind of up and down with money. Like I've never been broke, but I've sort of had phases where I'm kind of making okay money and making sort of not so okay money. And I have a phase of my life where I'm making like good money. And I sort of, I'm going to buy this. I bought this Kenwood TS870. And I sold this. I later sold this when I bought my next radio. But these are highly regarded, and people do have them and like them quite a bit still. I think it's my first like decent radio, really. It's actually like it's it's a step up from the 730. My 730 went down to my brother, and then I had this one, and I got more like active on kind of, I don't even remember. I did some Morse code and just kind of listening, and just kind of like I was never like super focused on like ham radio operating, but I was kind of more in the twiddling, and I'd be listening to things, and I would make the QSO every once in a while, just to like, like too many months had passed, I would start doing it, would be my thing. I never did much single sideband on this radio. No, I did. That's not quite true, because I did. What happened was like, I tried to do single sideband, but I was like, it was from California. It's a challenge, I don't know. I had like a vertical antenna, and I was trying to do single sideband. What I did is I bought an amplifier, and I bought like a ALS 600, which I still have, and it was like. And after I bought that, it's like, I could actually talk to people on single sideband finally. I never really got single sideband to work until I had an amp, to be honest. But I had this. God, what do I remember about this? I remember that amp more than anything else. And I just remember I remember this being a pretty good radio because this kind of was my introduction to Kenwood radios and sort of buying the Kenwoods over and over again. Because I sort of stuck with Kenwood after this. I think partly because just get the microphones were the same connectors and I sort of migrated some stuff over to the next radio. And the next thing I had was this, which is which I sold the 870. I bought the TS2000, the TS2000X, and I actually am able to talk to people on 1.2 gigahertz, even though I think most of the country 1.2 gigahertz is not so active. But the San Francisco Bay Area and where my physical location is. I'm kind of in Berkeley, so I have line of sight to a lot of 1.2 gigahertz repeaters. So they're not super active, but you talk in there. I remember I would talk on, I remember talking to somebody on 1.2 gigahertz and I got the wife and she said, oh, there's somebody talking on our channel, our radio. Because I think no one had ever talked on the repeater before. But there's even today, I still have this radio and there's there are a bunch of linked 1.2 gigahertz repeaters here. So it's not, I don't know, I don't know if you need 1.2 gigahertz, but out of radio completeness, it's kind of cool to have it. I bought it with the intention of doing satellites, but I didn't do satellites in old. I finally got set up really to do satellites properly only recently. So I have that antenna all set up and I got it. It's all working, but I'm just working. I have made some QSOs on satellite now, actually. Some people complain about this radio. They say the receiver isn't good, but I've never noticed. It's hard to tell. I think most modern receivers are pretty good. The main thing about this radio is it's small. It's super small. It's basically does everything. It does every band you could imagine, and it does not every band you can imagine, but every band that you could realistically find someone to talk to, except for 220 megahertz. So it covers most of ham radio, and it's super small. It does everything you need, really. And it's kind of a shame that Kenwood doesn't make an update to this, because this was out on the market for a while, and it sort of fit my sort of idea. I'm kind of I dabble in a bunch of stuff, I don't get it super focused on anything. I'm only now worked all states finally. So I'm sort of you do a little VHF, you kind of talk to a few locals on the VHF contest, and then maybe you talk on a repeater, and then do a little HF. It's that's me. I'm sort of flitting around from various ham radio things, but never getting super committed to anything. But that's sort of the interest, I think, is just the sort of getting all the little buttons doing something. And so I have this. I still have this, and I have this on top of my other radio. I'm not at home now, so I'm not can't really show the actual radio. And now we go to what I have now, which I only bought recently, which is the TS890. And so now basically I have the TS890 and the TS2000 together, and this is I've been playing with this a bit. I've been using, of all things, I've been using the remote, the internet control of it, and I'm away from home right now, so I've been basically doing FT8 and stuff like that. Mostly digital. I've done a few CW QSOs. I'm sort of okay. I can sort of struggle through Morse code. I passed the 20 word per minute extra back in old days when that was required. So I did a few CW QSOs just to sort of show I could do it, but I haven't been pushing CW too hard. I should see if I could do remote CW. I'm not sure how that's even possible. But it does actually work, and it has it does have some interesting features. I haven't even pushed all the buttons of this thing yet because I'm have a job basically. But it does have a nice feature where you sort of push a little button and it tunes in. It tunes in your Morse code that you're listening to exactly the right frequency. And it has a band scope finally. I think that was sort of I think it's time. Now is the time to have radio with band scope. So that's why I upgraded to it. And yeah, I'll probably do some more videos on the TS2000 and the TS890. I think once I'm back with them, and I can sort of push the buttons and see how they work. Partially, it's for my own exploration of these radios, as they have a lot of features. It does have this. One thing about the TS890, for me, it's sort of a silly feature, but for me, it sort of touches on the nostalgia thing. Is it does have a shortwave listening mode where the display turns in display quite similar to that original SW717 radio I had, and so you can kind of like tune around shortwave and listen. I do have some noise on some shortwave bands. For some reason, 13 megahertz for me on shortwave is pretty noisy, but the lower bands are good for me on shortwave, and I'll listen to that. What is it? The Cuba. The Radio Havana Cuba, I've been listening to that a little bit, which actually is an okay channel, as it has that sort of like, it gives me that old communism shortwave nostalgia a little bit for like old days of shortwave and communism. So it has that. I could probably listen to the same thing on the internet, but on the radio, it seems it's kind of interesting. I have it set up for FT8. I have set up for I can do FT8 remotely now too, and I do have them. I do have both the radios up at the same time. It has the one thing it does have is it has an input, so it has receiver inputs. I think this both in the TS870 both had receiver inputs, which is kind of receive antenna inputs, which is nice. So I have another receive antenna loop, and also have it also has an output too. So I have the output. I can feed the output from this radio. I have an SDR Play Duo, and I can output from this radio into the SDR Play Duo, and then I have another antenna that I have like a bunch of filters and stuff to keep it all from getting fried when I transmit, and I think it's all working because I'm able to transmit even with the amp on, and so far I've destroyed nothing, so I think I've done sufficient protection. So yeah, this is what I got now. I'll do more on the 890 when I'm back with it. Partially it's like I need to set up a camera and stuff by the radio so I can really do a video with the radio. But that is my ham radio equipment timeline, in case anybody's interested.